Hi, Mandy. Welcome.
Okay, you are going live.
How are you?
Thank you, Mark. Good evening. I am Pauline Proch, Chair for the School Committee, and I'd like to welcome you to the School Committee meeting of September 24th. Before I open the meeting, I would just like to say to our viewing public, if you are interested in making a comment, please go on through the YouTube. You will then see a link that will allow you to put in public comment. I am aware that there are a few seconds delay, and so I'm offering you the opportunity now to begin to put in your public comments while I open up the meeting. As always, our public comment is the first item on the agenda. So please feel free to start putting in your comments, and I will proceed to open the meeting. I am Pauline Proch, Chair of the School Committee. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Jen Iller, Vice Chair.
Present.
Tim Lepre.
Present.
Steve Sudovic.
Present.
Thank you. Zona Butler. Not here at the present, okay. Also for folks who will be presenting tonight, Roberto Santamaria.
Present.
Dr. Beth Hallett.
Present.
Thank you. Logan O'Connor.
Present.
Jen Erickson.
Present.
Our principals, Kim Kubish.
Present.
Eve Marie McNeil.
Present.
Michael Horton.
Here.
Mandy Vassal.
Here.
Thank you. Christopher Maury.
Here.
Thank you. And I would also like to note that we are also in attendance, our leadership team. So good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all. I would like to have a motion to accept the agenda. May I have a motion to accept tonight's agenda?
So move.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. I would like to make an amendment to this evening's agenda, if I may. And I just would like to add actually to amend the motion to include a brief presentation and discussion with Roberto Santamaria and the superintendent regarding a return to the hybrid model as planned on October 1st. Any discussion on that?
I move approval of the amended agenda.
Thank you, Tim.
Second.
Thank you, Jen. Steve, may I have your vote?
Affirmative.
Thank you. Zona, are you on? No, okay. Jen Iller?
Aye.
Thank you. And Tim Lepre?
Aye.
Thank you. Pauline Proch, aye. Agenda moved. This open meeting of Nantucket School Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of the public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will focus and feature public comment. For this meeting, Nantucket School Committee is convening by video conference by Zoom webinar as posted on the town's website identifying how the public may join. As we are waiting for comments from the public, I was asked to read a comment that was not, space would not allow for the comment to be put in this evening. So I agree. This is public comment from Rob Giachetti. I want to start by acknowledging all the people on this call who have worked tirelessly toward a safe and effective return to school for our children. The circumstances you are all dealing with are incredibly challenging and are certainly not business as usual. This week, I wrote a letter to Dr. Hallett and the committee outlining my belief that we should return to school for full in-person learning with a remote learning option for those who need or want it. The main point I want to make this evening is to urge the administration and the committee to make thoughtful decisions that reflect the objective reality in our community. In the face of the recent so-called cluster of COVID cases, followed by however many days in a row now without any new cases, it is easy to get caught in a seesaw of fear and reaction. We all heard the governor say this afternoon that we need to avoid knee-jerk reactions to pockets of new cases. We know they are going to occur. I believe we overreacted to the last cluster by not applying our local knowledge and deciding to let the schools open as planned. We all know that the population denominator of 12,000 being used in the state's heat map is false. Most estimates I have heard put the current numbers at 3 to 4 times that. Further, the DESE grants latitude at the local level, indicating that while the department strongly recommends the implementation of an in-person model of instruction, how local district schools will reopen in the fall, whether in-person, remote, or hybrid, is ultimately a local decision made by the superintendent of schools in conjunction with the school committee and other local officials. It is curious that when we were white or clear on the heat map, we elected not to follow the Commonwealth's guidelines, which advise reopening fully in person. We decided to implement more conservative measures and open in the hybrid model. Then we lit up a false thread. We suddenly decided to follow the guidelines and transition to full remote. It now seems apparent that we will return to hybrid learning as planned on October 1st. We can be certain there will be additional clusters as we return to school. I urge the administration and committee to look at the objective reality with a very critical eye before shutting down once again. The impact on our kids is too great. The handling of the last cluster proved that our system here is working. The source of the spread was determined and contact tracing explained the path it took. The idea that a Labor Day gathering was the source turned out to be false. Further, that there have been a large beach parties constantly since June, which did not lead to a surge. College students partied together all summer, in particular over the 4th of July, both in and out of doors. High school students were all together and unmasked and not distancing at graduation. This did not lead to a surge. They've been together ever since. Primary school children have been playing all summer in neighborhoods, at the beach, at the Boys and Girls Clubs, baseball, ballet classes, everywhere. Private schools are back in session without any issues. So the notion that keeping our children out of school is going to make a meaningful difference is simply flawed. The only additional risk posed is the crossing of groups or pods who are not otherwise spending time together. In light of the overly conservative guidelines we have adopted for in-person learning, this is certainly a manageable risk. And that was Rob Giachetti. Thank you. And hello to Bobby Planzer. Thank you for telling me that you're watching and you're there with us. Jen, do you have comments from the public?
I do not see any comments in the Zoom, and the chat is disabled on YouTube.
Okay. All right. I believe that with the opening introduction and my reading of the last item, that has given time to have comments come in. I'll give it just a few more minutes and then we will close and begin the presentations. I'll just give it a little bit more.
I'll just take a minute then, if I may, Madam Chair, to ask where you're going to place Mr. Santa Maria on the agenda.
He's coming, will be the first on the presentation.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, at this point, I would like to invite Roberto Santamaria and Dr. Beth Hallett for brief presentation and discussion on the hybrid opening. Welcome, Roberto.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today. Beth, how are you doing?
Beth?
Sure, I'd be happy to start. Roberto and I have been working closely together over the course of many months, I would say at this point, and have certainly discussed along with and in conjunction with other officials in the town and including the chair of the school committee, what the best course of action is with regard to school opening or closing, or in our case, moving to remote. And the original decision of moving to remote was something that we did discuss and we did think about carefully, especially with seeing such a quick rise in cases and not having had the ability at that time to determine where things came from, where they would be heading. The decision to move to remote learning for 2 weeks was, again, out of the abundance of caution and without knowing exactly where our trajectory was heading. And I just want to be clear that the decision was made with conservatism, so to speak, but with a full intention of seeing how things went and where we would go. Starting with October 1st as our day to return. So I want to thank Roberto for the work that we've done together, and I appreciate him being willing to come and present a little bit of what he shared yesterday with the select board, but also kind of where things are currently and where we are heading and how that might then become our helping with our decision going forward. So Roberto, if you want to share slides, I believe you can through sharing screen.
Okie dokie. So before I start, I want to make it explicitly clear that no decision about closing schools was taken lightly, nor was it a knee-jerk reaction. We were working under the direct orders of what was given by DESE at the time. It was not, and we did not ignore any previous guidance. This was not what we have to respond to, was not a guidance at the time, it was an order. Since the closure and what happened in Nantucket versus what happened in Chatham, where the map went red and they had to close, not knee-jerk. The DESE has released new guidance, new orders, and given a little bit more leeway to the local jurisdictions. It was not taken lightly, and it was not just done out of because we felt like it. So that's really important to understand. With that, I will go ahead and share screen. Real quick, I kept it this time to only a few slides. So real quick, I'm just going to try to go through it. So from what we know now is that the crowds over the Labor Day weekend were spreader events. And these last 10 days, we had, well, actually, as of today, it's 25 cases in the last 10 days. We had one today, but not anyone local. That person was brought in, as for lack of a better word, was an import. So now, as of today, was 46 cases in the last 10 days. So real quick, what we saw was this meteoric rise in our cumulative incidence. So what's really important to understand with this is that this is cumulative incidence. This is everything from the very beginning, from when we first started testing. So the trend on this is always going to go up. It's never going to go down, and it always looks worse than it actually is. What we're looking to see is that slope of that line on how steeply it's rising. And what you see there is how it's starting to plane out. And then the perhaps best news we received today, this is as of about an hour and a half ago, we received today's BioBot sample. And the sample that we took this past Monday shows non-detect of COVID in our sewers. So if you remember our discussions on the sewage metrics, is that this is a predictive index. So what it shows is people shedding the virus before they're showing symptoms or before they're symptomatic or even infectious. So we can base precautions, base decisions, things on that, on how infectious a population can be. In this case, what this is showing is that everyone who had sewage transplanted to the sewage facility, the Surfside sewage facility, Sconset also showed up as non-detect on the same day, is that approximately well over 60% of the island's population had sewage transported to these two facilities that day, which was Monday, I believe, came back non-detect, which means it's a pretty representative sample that we're not having a lot of shedding. So this is excellent news. Today we only had one case. Yesterday we had none. The day before we had none. So we're well on our way to going into yellow at next week's map, and hopefully back to gray the week after. However, so I'll go back to that later. However, given this information, when we talk about the yellow, green, and red and gray, it's also important to understand that because we did speak to the state, and the state did give us a hard no, saying they are not going to use the different denominator, the population that we have, the population estimate that we have, because they have to use a validated study and a validated metric through a validated vendor, which ours is not done. They use the Donahue Institute. So as a result of that, even one case, an average of one case per day, will hit that red. So it's really important for us to understand that DESI now has given us that local leeway to want to be able to make that decision, which we did not have before. So what's really a big part of this is where we talk about the replication, the basic reproduction rate of the virus. When it's equal to 1, it means for every one person that gets sick, one other person gets sick as well. They infect one others. We want that always to be below 1, which means that virus will not propagate in a population. What we've been seeing in the last 7 days, which is what's highlighted in green, is that is going down. Is going down by 30% each infectious period, which is 2 days. So this is all great news. We just need to maintain our vigilance like we were in the winter. And with that, I will quickly move over to yesterday's map, which is what we see. You'll see us in red again, but like I mentioned, is we're hoping to be in yellow by next week. So we shouldn't be in bad shape. And I think moving to open in a hybrid format by October 1st is a prudent decision.
If I may, through the chair, I just want to remind everyone that the data that we see in the Massachusetts map is 1 week out, meaning it is data that was collected and is being included, but we're looking at a cumulative group, and that's why we are still in the red, even though currently we are seeing a great decline in our infections here on the island. So I, again, have felt very comfortable working with Mr. Santamaria in this, and we have been in touch with the State Department of Public Health. When a town or municipality goes into red status, the state deploys a command center group that helps to discuss how to mitigate additional cases. And we had a very good discussion with this group, and they made us aware of the newer DZ guidelines about spending a little more time waiting to see how things go under a certain designation. So it helped us to understand that that we will be fine moving forward with a hybrid plan as we have decided with return to school on October 1st. So I'm really pleased that we've been able to get to that point, and I think it's safe to say that our students are ready to come back. Our staff will be happy to have students in person again, even if it's not all of them. And I'm certain that our parents are also ready for their children to have that experience. So I hope that everybody continues to wash hands, stay distance, and wear masks in the next few days and weeks ahead, so that we can have a successful hybrid opening.
Absolutely.
Thank
And
you.
one more, sorry, if I may, also through you, Chair, that the next meeting for the state, I don't know, Beth, if you received that email just 35 minutes ago, is going to be tomorrow. So we'll have our follow-up with the state afternoon.
Terrific. If I may, I'd like to just invite the school committee to ask questions or make comments if you have time, Roberto, to stay with us a little bit. Thank you.
Absolutely, I'm home.
Thank you. Janella, comments, questions?
Thank you. I don't really have any questions, but I think it's important that we remind our families that this is a fluid situation, and it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction by any means, but we do have to, I feel like as we monitor the numbers, we have to continue to remain flexible. So I will say, as a parent myself, I am so excited to start the hybrid plan on October 1st. I think that it's going to be a great way to get our kids back into school under these new and different circumstances that they're not used to necessarily. And I think it's going to be a good adjustment, and hoping all goes well, and one day soon we'll be talking about full back in-person school. But that's all I have. Thank you, Roberto, for all your work with us. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jen. Zona.
Thank you, Roberto, but I missed your last comment. It went, silent for me. What was your last comment you made?
When I responded to, after Beth spoke?
Yeah.
Okay, I was saying that the next meeting with the state is tomorrow. That Emergency Operations Command Center group that they set up for each red community, they try to meet with you every week that the group is red. Our next meeting is tomorrow.
And so have we already officially been moved from the red to the yellow?
Not yet. We're still red as of, what is this today? Thursday, as of yesterday. Okay. Because there's a 1 week lag in their case, their data mining. There's a 1 week lag, so we were still in the midst of the large surge last time.
I want to just re-emphasize what Jen said, that we have to be flexible. I think we are cautious because we have a lot of lives to worry about, and I'm going to put this out there that, parents, please don't send your kid to school sick. Please help with that. I mean, you hear all over the country that that's what's happening, and all it takes is one. So please be mindful of that, and thank everyone for their hard work. It's not hard having to take the brunt of this, when everybody doesn't agree, but the bottom line is that we're trying to do what's best for everyone. Just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Zona. Tim?
Roberto, I'm just curious. You said one case a day would keep us in the red?
Correct. On average, if we maintain an average of 1 case per day, so even if we have 2 days of 7, that will keep us in the red. And that's the argument that we have with the state. even though we are a low-risk community, which is why the new DZ guide or DZ guidance and orders gave a lot of the leeway to this local organization.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Steve?
Yeah, a couple of positive comments. Roberta, you said today's sewage report was virtually nil. I would like to add last week's was too. So that's 2 reports in a row. I think it was actually 2 positive cases last week. And the zeros that we've been seeing are certainly encouraging, and I hope they stay that way. I had a couple of other questions, but they were answered in the newspaper, if we could trust their reports of what you had to say. I do think the figure of about 17,000 as a population is certainly consistent with what our former town clerk was saying for years. I think it's interesting that the state simply won't accept our figures, but I'm just as glad, I'm comfortable as long as we don't have too many more cases in the next few days with the hybrid starting on October 1st. It's time. Our kids got to be face to face with their staff. A clarification, you said near the end of your comments that the state had given us some leeway. I didn't follow that. Could you explain that again?
Yes, and Beth, if you want to, okay, I see, see you.
If I may, on September 14th, a letter went out to school committee members explaining that that designation should be looked at over the course of several weeks because it is a metric that is important and valid, but there are lots of different things that come into that metric. And one of the biggest things that they said was to consider what is happening locally and work with the local DPH and local officials to understand clearly where things are occurring, how they're occurring, and how this transpires within the community. So that's exactly what we have done ever since the first discussion we had with the spike in cases. And our decision to move to remote occurred on September 10th, which was 4 days prior to this letter that came out. So the fact of the matter is, it's an understanding that we need to look carefully at some of the specifics with our local Department of Public Health, with our town officials before we make decisions. And at that time, on September 10th, those discussions did happen, and we knew that there was a trajectory of rising cases, and so that was the reason behind the immediate closure and remote learning until October 1st.
So the leeway is that we're supposed to look at a number of weeks rather than just 1 week at a time.
Correct, and also a number of data points, in particular, also understanding about cases, and that has been very helpful in understanding certain metrics and certain things, the age of the folks who are positive, where things are occurring, how they're occurring. So all of that is all important information that should be brought into a decision. So that's been helpful.
Okay, final question. And I would note that we did have one more case reported today. So hopefully that's not a trend after 3 days of zeros. But it won't take many cases, if I understand you correctly, to have us in the red again next Wednesday. And that, heaven forbid, would be 3 red weeks in a row. Would you still be comfortable with us opening hybrid the next day?
Personally, yes.
Well, I mean, as the director of public health is what I'm asking.
Yes. No, absolutely. Mainly because we are I wouldn't say relatively, we are definitely a low risk community. What we're seeing is in the relic of statistics that you run into is the smaller your data sample, the more percentage points each case actually is. So in our case, they're trying to create a standardized incidence ratio per 100,000 population. When you use 11,000 people per 100 as your base population, when you extrapolate that to a standardized incidence, one case translates out to something like 9.7 cases per 100,000, when red communities are considered 8 cases per 100,000 or above.
All right, I'm going to cheat and ask one more easy one. Will there be another sewage report a week from yesterday? And so if that one's still looking as good as the last two have, that would be an important indicator as well.
Yes, through the CARES Act funding, we're continuing the sewage testing on a weekly basis for as long as we have that funding available.
Good,
so
thanks.
far, yeah, for the time being.
Great. Thank you, Steve. I would ask either Roberto or Beth to help maybe add to some comments that I've had throughout the week from parents. I think that it's important for folks to understand the restrictions and the guidelines that the public school is having to work with or within. Because I think some folks are looking at the community and restaurants are open, there's indoor dining, we can now go back to the theaters, we can get our hair done, we can go to the gym. And so I know that folks are feeling like, well, why are we not giving our children the opportunity to come back into the classroom? So would you just be able to sort of touch upon that? I know you've sort of made some points already, but I think for those who are watching tonight, who still feel that we've been extremely restrictive in the decisions or the state's guidelines. Could you just share a little bit more? Thank you.
Yes, so absolutely. So speaking for all the other industries out there is what I have to regulate, unfortunately, is the way it sounds like, is every single one of them has a different set of guidelines. Every single one of them have a different set. There's an entire spreadsheet that it's the CDC's spreadsheet, but I know that there's a little bit of a mistrust to the CDC right now, but I know people who work there and I would still put faith in our CDC. The people who are at the top, maybe not, but the people who work for the CDC, though, not over 9,000 employees who work there, they are good people, and they are people who are trying to do their job and to do it right outside of politics. So with that aside, the CDC spreadsheet has a risk factor ratio for many different types of activities, hundreds. And then the state of Massachusetts, the governor's orders and the state public health interpret that spreadsheet to create local rules and regulations. And you're seeing constantly, probably in your emails, you get order numbers, whatever. Right now we're, I think, in order number 76, I believe. The one that they're going to be discussing at tomorrow's press releases, which is about the new orders on indoor dining and bars. And one of the things that's going to irk a lot of people is that they're actually lifting some of the restrictions. You're now going to be allowed to have 10 people per table, and you're allowed to have bar seating. You still can't belly up into the bar, but you can now sit at the bar. Something I don't personally agree with, and those are the state regulations. So things like that are not in my hands, other than making things more strict. And right now in Nantucket, we have no reason to make anything stricter than the state law until we see something that causes us to issue an emergency order. So like you said, the theater, the gym, restaurants, bars, those are governed by a completely different set of rules at the governor's level. Schools, public schools specifically, are governed by a completely different entity. So that, and I'll let Dr. Hallett connect on that. We're hearing a lot of criticism about, well, public schools are closed, but the private schools are open, because they're actually governed by another entity, a different entity than the one that you are as the public schools. So I find it really it's really difficult to tease out every individual industry. And what we're personally, see, like, you know, if you want me to use Mr. Sodovic's terms, speaking as the health director, I think it's a bad idea to be at the gym for a long time. I think it's a bad idea to go to the bars. I think it's a bad idea to be in large congregation groups. Going out to restaurants and eating, absolutely. Absolutely. Sit down, have your meal. Absolutely. Going out dancing, bad idea. But those are all allowed by the state regulations. And it's all a matter of a personal responsibility. If you want to go out and belly up to a bar in a different state like Florida where you're allowed to, well, just look at Florida's cases and we'll compare Florida's cases and Massachusetts cases and we'll see which one learns better and quicker. As far as the schools go, I'll turn it over to Dr. Hallett.
So Roberto explained that the schools do fall under a different set of guidelines, and it is definitely something that we have been looking at ever since we talked about reopening. And our guidelines do say that we should be maintaining social distance between 3 and 6 feet, and our guidelines do say that children should be wearing masks, as teachers should also be wearing masks at all times, that we should not be, that we should be facing in the same direction, that we should be clustering or podding. So I think it's a challenge also to consider that schools are large buildings with a lot of people inside. And so it is important that we have those regulations in place to make sure that our staff and our students are safe. And we have been conservative. We have worked with our union to determine that 6 feet is where we want to be. And that was a recommendation and still is a recommendation from the Department of Education. But there is allowance for 3 to 6 feet. So it is confusing, I'm sure, when there are restrictions that are being lifted elsewhere, but they are still important to be held. We are held accountable by them in a school. But if you think about it, we are also there will be a lot of people in the building, and we want to make sure that we are doing things safely. So I understand that it can be confusing to the public, and I also understand the confusion or the challenge that we have in seeing our private schools have the opportunity to open up because they don't fall under the same restrictions that the public schools do. I also believe, and I may be corrected, please forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think they're also a lot smaller in the sense that they have smaller enrollment and fewer students. So, and perhaps more space within their buildings. So that said, I think we are being cautious. I think we are being smart. I think our decision, and I still stand by my decision along with Chair Proch and Roberto as well, that closing was the right thing to do for 2 weeks and to start remote. But October 1st is right on our doorstep, and we are ready to come back to that. And I think that with time, I think we will see that we're doing the right thing, and we'll move forward carefully together and reevaluate all along the way. As both Zona and Steve said, that's important too. And Jen Millard as well. We need to keep reevaluating and watching carefully as we move along.
Thank you, Beth. Other conversations, obviously, that's happened through email with parents. I think there have been struggles with the remote learning for some parents and students, if not many. What would it take for the conditions? What conditions will we have to be under if we were not going to actually return to in-person school next Thursday? What are some of the things that would be the measurements? And then also, what is our plan when we go back to hybrid? Should there be an outbreak in a certain classroom? What is the plan so that we wouldn't necessarily, or would we, close the entire school down if we were to get a positive in a particular cohort?
So I can speak to some of that, and I'm sure Roberto can speak to the other part of it. With regard to a case that might happen within the school, we will be following the protocols that are in place, that are the Department of Education protocols, but also CDC, and they align in almost all cases that way. And we will make sure that we're following the expectations and the procedures. Obviously, contact tracing and identifying close contacts is the most important thing. Sealing off rooms and allowing for disinfection to occur, and for removing or separating any students that were close contact. That's all part of our protocols. And we know that at some point that could happen. And so we will need to be ready. But with regard to closing an entire school, I think we would need to see, and certainly that would come from at the recommendation of Roberto, we would need to see that there was a risk of spreading through either contact tracing or else or otherwise that would warrant us to close a school or district. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, Roberto. You certainly know much more about contact tracing and about than I do.
No, absolutely. You hit it right on the head. It would have to be a pretty extreme circumstance to close an entire school. The response plans that were already set up that we worked to get, that Dr. Hallett was amazing in putting up, and we worked together. I proofread it, but it was all, my hat's off to you. I don't think I could write that many reports that quickly. I think those are all in good shape, and it would have to be a pretty extreme situation to shut them down. We would have to, in order to not go back to hybrid next week, we would have to see a surge equal to or greater than what we saw 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago.
Okay, you went a little soft sound-wise there, Roberto. Would you mind just saying that last sentence again, please?
Yeah, in order for us to shut down a school, sorry, I think there's a lot of background noise here. My neighbors are out playing. So in order for us to shut down the schools, it would have to be a pretty extreme situation. And we would have to see surges greater than, or at the very least equal to what we saw in the last 2 weeks, or 21 days at this point.
Terrific. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here this evening and answering our questions. And just as a reminder to everybody, the protocols are listed on the Nantucket Public School website. There is a lot of information on there. I do recommend that folks go there to read and look at all of the work that has been discussed and planned. And I think it's important that folks are familiar with the protocols that we've put in place. Steve, I see your hand raised.
Oh, good. Heaven knows I do not want this to happen. But if we got a few more cases, and I did, Roberto, figure out how to do the math on these metrics, by the way, the yellow, red, etc. If we got a few more cases and we were in red again next Wednesday, and this is more a question maybe for Beth, that's 3 weeks in a row of red. Don't the DESE metrics require us to go remote after 3 weeks in a row?
So with the newest guidelines, it is still up to the district to determine. And again, I would be talking with Roberto and finding out, are these cases of individuals who have come to visit for a day or a weekend, or are these individuals that are local? And we would need to look at the specifics. But the guidelines that recently came out determined that it's a local decision, and we have to look carefully at the more of the specific details around cases and around spread before we make any sort of a decision like remaining in remote, so to speak.
Okay, I'm glad to hear it. I'm just fearful, my nervous nature, of having to close and open, open and close, back and forth a few times, because that could be disruptive too. And that's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I think we're probably all in agreement that we wouldn't want to be bouncing back and forth. The other piece, and I know we've touched upon this in other meetings, but as we get closer to going into the hybrid, is I know we're already talking about it and planning it, but I think having our counselors at hand, ready to talk to students when they come back to school. We know the mental health of our students. There are a lot of families struggling and have struggled since March, just alone with the COVID to deal with. But having been away from their peers and out of the structure of the school environment, we know is very difficult for many. And that's not something that we take lightly. So for families, parents, students who are listening, we will have plans. We do have plans. We have our counselors, we have our guidance counselors and our principals and our teachers ready to support your children when they come back. And for those who also continue in hybrid or are continuing full-time remote, I would say there's been a huge increase of mental health needs across the community. And it is something that we are very aware of and will continue to support our students as they need. So thank you again, Roberto, for coming this evening. You are free to leave and have your evening to yourself now, but I really appreciate you joining us tonight.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Absolutely. Let me know if you ever need anything else, and we're here.
Thank you. And thank you for all the work you're doing. Zona, you have a comment? You're muted. Oh, you're just saying goodbye. Oh, okay. Everyone's just waving goodbye. Goodbye. Such a friendly bunch. Okay, moving on, I'd like to invite our principals to present their school handbooks. And I'd like to ask Kim Kubish if she would please go first. And I think before we go into this, I just want to let our committee know and the public that our principals did not rewrite the entire thank goodness they didn't rewrite the student handbooks, but there are obviously items that had to be amended and added because of the COVID and coming back into a hybrid situation. So I think what we're going to hear from each of our principals are really just the amendments to the handbooks. Is that correct for you, Kim?
Yes, I will tell you that I did feel the need to go back in and review every single item that was in there. And so what I did do is highlighted in yellow for all of you, because this is a draft, and that's also important that as we present this to school committee, this is a draft for you. And upon approval, then I will go back and change format as needed. But what I did was I felt very strongly that our school council had worked really hard on our handbook to bring it up to snuff, if you will, 2 years ago. And so I did not want to throw that entirely out and call me positive and hopeful. There are so many things in our handbook that are still valid and important and will exist whether we're in pandemic or not. So what I did was to put in yellow some comments that reflect our time period right now. And I said in all cases that with COVID-19, it means this. So, oh, wow, somebody's put this up on the screen for me to go through. I would just say page 2, there was, I changed the letter to talk about this very unique year we're in. I did share that, as I always do, you should go to the district website to review policies, and that we really try to put some policy, but mostly protocol and practice as it pertains to the elementary school in our handbook. On page 6 and 7, I just updated school committee members and that we are meeting virtually because of the governor's requirements to do so in this time period. if you keep rolling through, and it's really just rolling to the yellow, pages 9 through 11, and those numbers aren't there. I talked about parent responsibilities and involvement, and this will be a hard shift for our families because on any given day, you can find several visitors in our elementary school. And so I use the language of until the health metrics change, there will be limited visitation. We still hold out hope to have some meet and greets that we will do outside the school. And then we will have places for parents who regularly drop off things that their children forget to bring to school. We'll have a table set up right outside of our front door with painter's tape and pens, and they'll be able to label it and leave it right there for us to get to students in the school. But as you go through pages 9 to 11, it talks about no visiting. Volunteering will be different. We always welcome volunteers, but it may look like we need some support outside of school, meaning cutting out letters or putting books together or those things. So we don't want to turn people off, but we don't feel at this time it's appropriate to bring other people into the school. Also, we'll be doing virtual meetings with teachers. This is to allow everyone to choose what they feel most comfortable and safe to do. In extended day, this has been a hard hit because we had so many kindergarten children, as they can't go to the club, who participated in extended day at the end of the day. I know that the director, Tracy Roberts, is working at trying to come up with a plan to hopefully be able to support our youngest students, as the club has been helping with our students at NES for grades 1 and 2, but also grade 3 is there, and they're putting together programs for grades 4 and 5 as well. As you continue down, I changed it to label our new special services director. As we keep going, page 13, we have new pre-K hours. This changes. We're going to be ending our pre-K program at noon. This is also the first reference to how kids are going to come in the school and leave the school. We will not have breakfast buddies. So the students will be lining up in assigned spots outside. We have shifted our morning duty to include several staff members to be outside to supervise. We'll be closing off the K circle, and we will have ropes with 6 feet designation for every single class to line up and have students who will talk about those protocols with them, but have students line up 6 feet apart, and we'll be able to show them what 6 feet really looks like. If you keep scrolling, I talked about that is morning drop off. Parents can wait outside with their children, but we have been talking of this all summer long, that it will look very different in the morning. I spoke about no breakfast buddies. Important, and I think I'm probably covering this for all of our schools. Attendance is required virtually as well as in person on their assigned cohort days. So for any parents who are looking right now and they're seeing in Aspen VP, that stands for virtually present. We do have to report these numbers to the state for the remote times and for the in-person times. So attendance is required. These again are things that we have been speaking to parents about weekly in our newsletters. Whenever we have struggles with attendance, we try to get right on top of that to support families and talk about the importance of being in school. And so we have a progressive system for that includes letters and then meetings. And I would just share that those meetings for now will be virtual with parents. Page 23, I'm talking about, we so are grateful for all that parents are doing right now. And we have to really count on them to assist our students with getting online and completing that work that is asynchronous. And we've had tremendous support and assistance. That's in the academics column, certainly. You're right there. The yellow is right there. That we are counting on it and so grateful for it. On page 28, it talks about going to the nurse's office, and those will always be call ahead visits, meaning children before used to say they needed to go to the nurse. I've talked all about that. Thank you for whoever's running the screen, Jen. Now we're into the nurses. Thank you. So teachers will have to call from the classroom to send a student to the nurse. Lots of times we've had parents come in to visit with the nurse, and that cannot happen. But our nurse is wonderful, and she responds to emails, and she will place calls as well. Keep going. More about the community school, and that we do not have our after school activities or our breakfast buddies. I did have on page 29, Mary Leprey's contact info. We're past that, that's fine. We'll have a phone number, a phone in the office that will be designated for students to call from, and we will make sure that that is sanitized. We did talk about masks for all, and Mr. Sordovic, just so you're aware, our NES masks have come in for our staff, and they are lovely. Locations for student discipline services. This is page 39. We used to use our student support center. That's going to have to look a little bit different. And so we will be working on not doing buddy teacher timeout, but using possibly the cluster should students need to take a break from their classroom. On page 51, we talk about the cafe changes. We won't be going to the cafeteria for any of our food service. And obviously we've shared before that food is coming to the classroom for lunch. And then, as I mentioned before, it'll be hard, but we will have no visitors for lunch. And that was a time when we would have a lot of parents come to join their students for lunch, and that is just not going to happen this year. And then the biggest shift is page 53 to 64. And I'm not going to spend much time going through that because you've all had access to it prior to this, but these are the COVID protocols for our building. They talk about how we use our bathrooms, the hand washing, using the playground, where we'll be outside, using outside spaces for teaching. Our HVAC system is in there, how we will continue to do fire drills and lockdown drills and follow the necessary protocols to do those, but do those in the manner that we will be practicing, and kids will know very well from the video we'll be sharing with them, if teachers haven't already shared it with them, with some of our students who are acting out the safety protocols. And then that will be a big part of what we do as soon as we can have our students back in. So I think that's it for NES, and I probably covered a great deal that the other schools will be covering as well.
Thank you very much, Kim. Jen, any comments, questions?
Thank you. Honestly, I'm going to need more time to review all of them. There's so much to them, and just receiving them 2 days ago, I want to be able to thoroughly read through each and every one. And for some reason, I started with CPS, which is, I think, the longest one. So I haven't gotten to you, Kim, to be quite honest. But I'll email you, I guess, if I have any questions or.
Please do.
Thank you.
That would be great. Thank you, Jen. Zona? Zona, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. No questions at this time. Thank you, Kim. I appreciate you putting COVID-19 in there as well as the other things and making the updates necessary. My only suggestion, and I'm typing up a little email to you as well, or all of you, is that I think we may have suggested the last time we did these to put at the bottom the date it was adopted or approved, this new version. I just want to make sure that that still happens, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yep.
Zona. Tim,
No questions.
thank you. Steve?
Well, Kim's almost forced me to make some comments. Actually, only two things. Thank you for the highlighting. It did
Yes.
make it a lot easier to get through. I appreciated that.
Yes.
And secondly, and this applies to, I think, 3 out of 4 of you, Mrs. Butler is no longer the school committee secretary.
Did I miss that, Steve?
Yes.
It was not my idea, but it is me. Just for the
Got it.
accuracy.
Steve is correct.
Yes. Great.
And thank you for telling me that. And I will make that change. And as I said, the formatting, I apologize for, but it was, I thought rather than go through the formatting, I'd wait for any suggestions that you had, and then I would go back and do the formatting. So I'm grateful that the highlighting helped.
No, if
Yes.
it's still my turn, it is appreciated. I didn't see any problems with the formatting, but when it's finished and adopted, you'll put that on your website so it'll be up to date.
Absolutely.
Great. And that will save me at this point having to make those comments to the 2 other principals as to the secretaryship. Thanks, Kim.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Sordovic. Okay, moving on. I'd like to ask Eve Marie McNeil to please do the NIS handbook.
Hello, everyone. As
Hi.
always, Kim Kubish makes it easy for me, coming right behind her. Our handbooks are very similar, so I'll try not to repeat too much, but I can show you a little bit of how we formatted similarly, in that we noted in parts where there would be changes for this school year. And then we have an addendum at the end, which ours is slightly different, but I can talk about that. So as you're going through, I don't have highlighting. I am sorry, that would have been super helpful for both you and me as I review. Page 2, updated the letter as we do each year. And this year it talks a little bit about our year, whether we're remote, hybrid, or in person. And then we're going to jump to, I will change the secretary. That I'm one of the handbooks that has to correct that on page 5. So I wrote that edit. On page 6, where it talks about communications, I added virtual meetings in there. That wasn't there before, but it's something that we're all doing now. So I thought I would capture that. On page 7, it starts chapter 2, Parents' Responsibilities and Involvement. And that's where you'll see the bold and italicized print. And you're going to see that throughout. And that's one of the ways that we're trying to let families know that this is a change due to COVID, due to the current situation that we're in. But we also didn't want to delete everything that we had in the event that we have the good fortune to go back to all in person. So you will see that throughout. And on this particular page, it talks about we may not be able to have in-person meetings, but you can still meet with the staff members, for example. Talks about until the community health metrics support a full return to school, volunteers will not be permitted to enter the building. So you'll see that throughout the handbook. And then I can jump you to page 10, which looks very different, chapter 3, because most of it's new. It's under the attending Nantucket Intermediate School. There we go. We adjusted the school hours and days, the morning arrival procedures, the afternoon dismissal sections. All of these have been refined to reflect our most current procedures with regard to social distancing, etc. We described the different cohorts. Our morning arrival looks similar to NES's, where we will have teachers greeting their students outside and walking them into school, because we want to begin the teaching of what does it look like to be in a line 6 feet apart as you enter the building. How do you enter the building? We're going to be very explicit with all of that. And then it continues on to page 11, where we talk about our dismissal procedures and how those are going to be really tightened up and intentional. On the next page, it starts with regard to the absences section. And I just want to say here, and it says it later, that it's so important for our parents to still call in with student absences. Even if they're fully remote, it's so important to let us know that a child will not be attending school virtually or in person, and to please leave detailed information for us if they are out due to illness. Our school nurse really wants to know that, and she may be calling to follow up with regard to the symptoms that your child's experiencing. So please don't stop the practice of calling in if your child will not be attending school. Let's see. And then the next page I had a note for you is page 16. It's actually school cancellation, snow days, or delayed openings. And we just kind of called out in our bold and italics print that it's possible there's no such thing as a snow day anymore because we have the capacity to be remote as long as the winds aren't too fierce to interfere with our internet connections. So we just thought we would note that. On page 17, we have, we just changed it from just simply homework to homework and remote learning. And at the bottom of that section, there's just a little sentence about the use of Schoology, and parents will be invited to Schoology in order to support their children at home. So we're looking forward to the implementation of that so that we can all work collaboratively together. If you want to go to page 21, we just talked a little bit about the change to taking books out in our library media services section. There still will be access to our digital copies of books, and students will be able to still take home books from the library. We just have a process of the librarian delivering specific books to children, instead of children going through and looking at lots of books and touching lots of books and pulling them out. She'll be bringing the books to the children, and then when they are returned, we have a process for storing and sanitizing them before they're recirculated. And the next place I had a note was on page 23 under Student Health, Chapter 6. And it's just the bold italicized at the top. It just directs people to Chapter 10, which will outline the health and safety protocols and procedures related to our current pandemic. And you'll see that soon enough. And then the next page I have highlighted is page 42. And that's, Kim spoke to these things like the differences with lunch and with lunch seating. We won't be in the cafeteria, and visitors will no longer be coming in for lunch. And just several notes about lunch in classrooms and those changes there. And then finally, our big new addendum starts on page 43, Chapter 10. We chose not to attach the entire safety protocols to our handbook, but instead worked hard to pull out the most salient parts that were specific to our families, because we know that we've already shared our other document and it's still accessible on the website and so they have access to the larger document with all the safety and health protocols, but these ones that are in here are specific to our families. That's just how we chose to go about that, and it includes a lot of links that if they're interested in links to click on things. Talks about mask breaks, everything specific to what it might look like for their child in school or what we need their help with. And so that's the end of that, I just want to take a minute to thank the school council who met several times over the summer, which is a new practice, and also to John Johnson, who worked diligently on putting this handbook together with, notes from the school council.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Eve Marie.
You're welcome.
Jen, questions, comments?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Zona?
I always have a problem with the mute button, so I apologize, everyone. Page 4. Eve Marie.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's great. And you're making me think that maybe we should add the protocols to every handbook. Sorry.
You want the whole, well, that, if you direct us that way, we'll do it. We kind of tried to pull out what we wanted. As you know, this is a large document. We want people to read it. I don't know. As you found, it's a lot to read.
I know. But I just feel like it's a nice, safe place for it to be where you can find it.
Sure.
Every time. But I'm just thinking right now.
All right. You let me know if you need that to change.
But thank you.
You're welcome.
Tim.
No questions. Seems pretty complete, but they may be getting too big so that nobody's going to read them.
Yeah, true.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
I think I'm going to say this, Tim. In every organization that I've been part of, nobody does read them until they need to read them. So it doesn't matter how small or big it is. And I hate to say it that way because it's a lot even for us to review. I would love to review less, but we're trying to touch on so many different topics to make sure we cover everything. And you guys always do such a thorough job. So I don't know. It's just one of those things.
Great. Thank you. Steve.
Yeah, picking up where Tim left off, we did, for those of you who were not around a few years ago, do a real hard look at trying to shorten these things up, and we did. But I can't see how any of this could be left out these days, as much as I agree with Zona. A couple of plaudits, if I may, one of which is in the form of a question. Are you all in agreement that there's no need for snow days anymore? You're just going to try to do things remote? Beth?
I'd rather hear from everyone. Beth, why don't you?
If I may, through the chair, we have had a little bit of discussion. It has not yet been decided whether or not that will be a full option, but it's something to entertain because we do have the ability to shift to remote fairly quickly, and as long as we know that students have devices in their hands and teachers have devices in their hands, we could potentially do it. It's not going to be, it'll be a decision that we discuss at length before we make that decision. Snow days are still on our calendar, and we will entertain whether or not we need to make those changes eventually. But right now, still to be discussed and determined.
To be determined. And another plaudit, Eva Marie, the librarianship shows the kind of detail with the storage of books and cleaning when they come back, disinfecting when they come back to the library. I appreciate that kind of care and thinking. And I guess I would recommend that if the other schools don't have that in their handbook, that they mention it. It may help. As Zona says, not too many people read these things, but it may make a few parents more comfortable with the way we're dealing with all of these issues. So thanks for that.
I just want to correct what I said. Not many people read them until they have to. So
that's what I meant, Zona.
All right. Okay, great. Thank you. I don't have any questions or comments. So thank you, Eve Marie. Michael Horton for CPS. You are up next. Welcome.
Thank you, Pauline. CPS's handbook did go through some major work and revision. There was a delay from the handbook last year, if you all remember. So it took some extra time to pull things together. So I have to thank the CPS school council members. You'll see their names in the first few pages. We started also in early July and met weekly to iron this out. And I also have to thank Principal Mandy Vassell, because on our first day in the job, when I went up to introduce myself, I said, "Hi, my name is Mike. Do you want to align our handbooks?" And off we went. So I do need to say right up front that the CPS handbook is now aligned with the high school handbook. It's not a complete copy and paste job. There are many things like AP tests and students leaving for lunch or driving to school. There's a few things that aren't relevant to CPS, so they were removed. And I agree with Zona and Steve. I mean, I was able to move ours from 90 pages down to 75, but there are things that just have to be in there. And I agree that it is cumbersome to work through, but it has to be in there. I don't know what else to take out, because a lot of issues have to be clear in case a situation does arise. I really just have 2 or 3 quick things to say. Number one is there's a quote there from Barbara White's work on Cyrus Pierce. Seeing that Cyrus Pierce is the only named school, right there, thank you. Retired English teacher from the middle school, as well as retired CPS school principal. I wanted to include that because, we're the only named school of the 4. And it was an interesting history lesson for me to read about Cyrus Pierce when I looked at Barbara's article. Another second thing is that the table of contents is now in alphabetical order. That was, believe it or not, like a 2-week discussion, whether it's by priority or by alphabetical order. So I aligned it with the high school. So I think that's a really good move. I do not have a lot of pretty yellow to go through because I did not embed COVID protocols. They're completely as an addendum at the end. As someone said, should we have them at all? Just like Eve Marie, I did not take it word for word from the district larger document, but I took 4 pages that relates to protocols at Cyrus Pierce. They're all at the end because honestly, did not want to have to go through this document line by line again next summer, because the handbook is the handbook is the handbook when the kids are in person. All the COVID stuff, hopefully, is a 1-year temporary thing that we can remove the addendum when it's appropriate in the future. So I don't know. Looks like you have the old copy, by the way, because I didn't see the page numbers. But the COVID protocols should be the same, Jen. If you want to go all the way to the end, pages 71 through 75. I see this. Yeah, this is definitely not the right version. See, it was 87. I got it down to 75. But the last 4 pages are the COVID protocols. Yeah, there we go. So I don't need to read through this line by line. Everything's already been covered because it's the same district protocols for all 4 schools. A couple of things that are more appropriate at Cyrus Pierce is we have lockers, unlike self-contained classrooms. So we are not assigning lockers to start the year. That's just one example. The last thing that I will say that was probably the majority of the conversation this summer was our cell phone policy. And we've decided to keep our cell phone policy the same, in that students cannot use their cell phones while in the building from 7:50 to 2:20. That is the one main difference between the middle school and the high school. The high school, when the students are a little bit older and they use technology in a different, more mature way as supervised by teachers, I understand that is developmentally, as students move into adulthood, more of an appropriate thing. But in talking to teachers, we just decided to stay with a no cell phone policy at the middle school. That's probably one of the biggest items in the middle school handbook. That and the dress code, of course, which now mirrors the high school. The rationale was that if students become familiar with policies and protocols in the handbook in grades 6, 7, and 8, how great is that they're the same as they move to high school, other than the cell phone policy. But I think this is going to really help as students transition from 8th grade to 9th grade. That's not all of a sudden, you can't do that 4 days suspension, because it's the same as it is in the middle school as it is in the high school. I was told to try to be 60 seconds. I'm not sure how long that was.
That was 59.5.
Well done, Michael. Jen, I'm going to go to you first.
Thanks so much, Mike. I feel bad because I was reading the version that had 87 pages, so maybe some of the comments that I'm going to make aren't even accurate, but a couple of things I was hoping that you could just check on for me. One is the bicycle helmets, because I thought it was Massachusetts law that everyone under the age of 16, and in the policy for CPS it says 13. So I'm just wondering if you could check that for me, if you don't mind.
I can absolutely check. And, you know, again, I maybe I assumed too much that the high school one was up to date. And you'll notice that our handbooks do say when it was adopted, but I also understand that approved tonight, we also write that this particular handbook was approved as of 9/24 to be posted. But yes, Jen Sardellis and I can check on that.
That would be fantastic. Thank you. And then the code for parents, where did that come from? Because it says the code for parents is sponsored by the Nantucket School Committee. So I'm just wondering if you could tell me where you found that.
Well, to be honest with you, it came from the high school as I with the high school. And I'm pretty certain that it's word for word in their handbook.
Okay.
Who lived that as a teacher at the high school. I know it really came back to making sure that, social responsibility was being carried out by parents. It usually happened right before prom season. And then it went into a little bit further to actually a code for parents that was inserted in the school committee. Whatever the date is, there should be a date underneath that of when that was adopted or included.
I didn't see that, but I just thought it was interesting because I've not noticed that in any of our other in our policy book or anywhere else. So I just thought that we should maybe look into that as a policy committee.
Absolutely, and I'm happy to report that that's now in the CPS handbook. It wasn't in the past.
Oh, okay.
Our handbook is obviously going to be a little bit different than it is for grades pre-K to 5.
And thank you. And then the last thing, if I can find it here, was the cell phone policy. I noticed that we have, or on that handbook, the CPS handbook, and maybe this was changed because I'm looking at the 87-page handbook, but on page 17 and 20, there's some repeated information on cell phones. And I'm wondering if you're just trying to really show and reiterate the importance of it, maybe. But there's the same language is being used, same paragraphs on page 17 and 20.
That, believe it or not, that's absolutely 100% intentional.
Okay.
We had some school council parents that wanted to make sure that, I believe it has to do with the cameras in the bathrooms. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's repeated because there has to be much more severe penalties if a student uses the camera feature in a restroom or locker room. It relates to bullying, obviously, but it's also repeated again a third time under electronic devices because our Chromebooks now all have cameras on them. So it does appear in the handbook more than once.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much for your help. That's it from me for now.
Thanks, Jen. Zona.
I don't have any questions, but thank you, Mike. I just want to talk about helmets for a little bit. Sorry. One of my pet peeves this summer is that I noticed not many people were wearing helmets. I mean, from children all the way to adults. And some of these people had their own bikes. Some of these people were renting bikes. So I was wondering, does anybody know what the law is for renting bikes? Are they not, they can't force them to have helmets? I'm just surprised we haven't heard about bicycle accidents because, we've had some of those over the years. Yes.
Am I allowed to respond to that through the chair?
You can, Mike. Yep.
I have to give credit that there's about 8 people behind me. You can't see them, but they're virtually behind me in their houses back in Nantucket. The school council members, as well as the admin interns, Tracy Malu and Adrian Lombardi. And 4 of them have all since texted me in the last 60 seconds, say the law is actually 16. So we have to update that from 13 to 16. And that's good feedback for Jen as well, unless she already knew that and caught that. I would imagine, Zona, then it ends up being an age thing. And if it's under 16, they can enforce it, but if it's over, they probably cannot.
It just was terrifying to me. Of all the things going on, the bicycle helmet is people, riding in traffic, not on the bike path, because they don't realize you should be on the bike path. That's not a sidewalk. So anyway, just a comment.
Thank you, Zona. Tim.
As an aside, I did have a town bylaw passed for everybody to wear a helmet. Unfortunately, it was never enforced. I think helmets are critical, and I think if adults wear them, the kids will wear them. But thank you very much, Mike.
Steve.
No, not really, but thanks, Mike, for getting it down to 75 pages.
Just a couple of comments. I think the code for parents, and I might be wrong, I can understand why that was originally in the high school book, because I think that might have come from when we did the parent presentations around serving alcohol around prom and graduation. And I think that the code for parents was something that parents actually had to sign, that they were willing. And we had people from different areas, I think from, Chief Pittman came to present, but I think we had attorneys come and present and talk about the laws around the consequences of being a homeowner and having children under 21 drinking at their home. So I believe, not that that's a bad thing to have in middle school, as sad as that sounds, but I do think that's where it originated. My other comment is when I read the Barbara White quote, it made me smile. So thank you for adding in Cyrus Pierce. And it made me think about, particularly in light of the culture that we are currently in this country, I wonder if, and because we also have access to remote now, whether it might be a good idea to invite Barbara to do a sort of a storytelling about Cyrus Pierce to our middle and high school students. I think his contribution was so significant to Nantucket, and I know that he and Mariah Mitchell worked together at some point at the schools, but I think what he stood for, and the fact that we've got our school named after him, I believe would be very good for our students to hear and understand the reasoning of naming our school after him. So maybe she could do something remote for high school and middle school. I think that's a good idea, Mike. I see your thumbs up.
Yeah, and maybe Mr. Kozort, could get involved, because I know he's a history buff.
That would be great. That would be great. And as Barbara White was also former teacher, but also former principal of CPS for a while, it would be nice. And I know she authored the book, so that would be great. So other than that, no, I don't have any other comments. So thank you, Michael, for your hard work. Mandy, let's invite Mandy Vassal for the high school. Welcome, Mandy.
Thank you. And thank you to my principal colleagues for going before me. You made my job a lot easier. So any questions? Because I think I'm done. No, I'm kidding. But in all seriousness, we did not make any changes, or let me just say that Ms. Sarah Dallas did not make any changes in the handbook this year. And I would like to start by thanking Ms. Sarah Dallas for all the work that she did do. We didn't make changes in our high school handbook this year because what we had originally talked about when Mike said, can we align our handbooks? And I'd like to refer back to his statement on what a great opportunity it is for us to align middle school and high school together so that whenever those students transition to the high school, what an easier transition it is once they come to the high school and they're ready. And it's just going to make it that much easier if we're on the same page and we're practicing the same policies. But what we have talked about is doing an overhaul for the handbook. And Ms. Sarah Dallas and I have talked quite a bit on having student input and faculty and staff input and parent input. This was not the year to do that with the COVID and the safety protocols. So we really, where our changes are in the addendum, and it's a separate addition to or separate to the handbook. So that's where you're really going to see the changes for the high school. And a lot of that's already been spoken to. I don't know that there's anything any different than what's already been talked about. Probably the only difference might be the changing of classes. We have the facilities crew has put in the dots in the hallways, which I think we talked about that whenever we did the safety walk around at the high school. But the dots are there to kind of give the students the idea of where they need to be in the hallway, going down one side, one direction and going the other direction on the other side of the hallway. That we have signs have been posted that one stairwell is an up stairwell and another stairwell is a down stairwell, just because the fact that they are so narrow. But other than that, we don't really have a lot of changes other than the safety protocols. So if there are questions about the safety protocols, we would certainly entertain those questions.
Okay, let me move to Jen Iller. Thank you, Mandy.
Not at this time, but if it's okay, after I have a chance to review it more thoroughly, may I email you with any questions or comments?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely, of course.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen. Zona?
No comments. Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zona. Tim?
Thank you, Mandy. No questions.
Okay, thank you.
Steve?
Ditto on the thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you. No questions.
Thank you.
Mandy.
I did forget to add that we do have a library section in the addendum also.
Thank you. Terrific. Thank you, everybody. I know that's a lot of work, but thank you. And thank you, Jen, for your work on the high school. Okay, moving on. We've got the budget directives. Beth, would you like to lead us through?
Certainly.
You're muted, Beth.
Story of my life. Okay. We have had some very preliminary discussions about budget directives. It feels a little surreal to be having budget discussions when school has started just a few days ago. It just feels quite strange. But Martin and I have had some discussions, and I'm happy to share a little bit about the draft budget directives that you have in your hands. I'm just going to go through a couple of bullets that are different, that have been adjusted to keep in mind the unique situation this year. So although the bullets are not numbered, I'm hoping I can direct you to the places that are slightly different. Bullet number 2, we wanted to make sure that as we are asking our principals to go through their building budgets, that they are thinking about projected enrollments and curricular needs, but also about the extenuating circumstances around COVID-19. Things we have to think about are things that we don't know yet how we're going to be looking at them, but it could be furniture. It could be staffing. So those are all pieces that we have to consider as we're discussing budget allocations for next year. The next one is bullet number 5, and that is to continue to support programs that sustain physical and social emotional development of our children, especially considering additional challenges that are presented by the current pandemic. We really want to be sure that we are including funding that will continue to support our students' social and emotional learning, particularly related to COVID-19. Our children have suffered a lot of loss, academics, but also loss of social learning, and we really must be ready to meet them where they are and to move them forward. And then if you kind of move down to bullet number 10, which is about budgeting utility expenses to more closely reflect actual expenditures in the last 3 years. It's just important to keep in mind that we do need to review and make sure that we are accounting for the changes that may indicate savings or additional expenses that have happened in a remote, in our remote environment, but also in our hybrid environment. Things are a little different if we're closing buildings earlier. Things are different if we are having fewer students or staff in the building. So just an important piece to look at as well. And then also bullet number 11, which is monitoring food service in the Nantucket Community School finances to reduce expenditures and raise revenues, and also to ensure that programs do not run into a deficit. This is very important related to the challenging environment due to the pandemic. We know that we have to examine in more detail how our food service and our Nantucket Community School operate and their needs as we move forward and help them and assist them with regard to the challenges that they are dealing with. It's a little difficult, again, at the very beginning to kind of look in your crystal ball and figure out where those needs might go. But those are the things we'd like to focus on. And then looking at the draft budget calendar, it's pretty straightforward. It's preliminary, and clearly we based this off of last year's calendar. It has allowed us to start thinking about and prepare for what's to come. And like I said earlier, this year being so unique and school starting so late, it just is a little more challenging attempting to begin this budget process without exactly knowing what our needs are until we have a little more time back in school and understanding the needs of the students and the staff. So to just kind of identify the meetings of note, I just want to make sure that people are aware. Martin and I have actually met already on Tuesday. We met with, yesterday, Wednesday. We had our first discussion with town about FY22 projections. And again, while it is quite early to predict where we will be in a few months, we will need to be conservative in our planning based on probable revenues losses due to the pandemic. So we are considering that and keeping that in mind as we plan for next year. Our health insurance projections to the town of Nantucket will be at the end of October, and we will have an ad hoc budget work group meeting that is tentatively sometime in November, and I believe that the chairs of each committee, FinCom, the school committee, and other important boards, HDC, et cetera, others will be invited to hear the same message. I think that's the important piece, is that we are aligned in our understanding of the message. So that is what I have got for the budget calendar and budget directives. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Beth. Jen, any questions?
No, just a comment. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Martin. I just want to mention that I'm happy there's conversation about the ad hoc committee for school committee being involved in the discussions with the town. I think that makes me happy to hear that this is going to happen this year. So thank you.
Of course.
I think that's you and me, Jen. So I'm glad you're happy. Zona, questions, comments?
No, I think you just answered it. So that's you and Jen that are going to be on the ad hoc committee?
Yeah, I think that's what's on our committee. I'm chair and vice chair. Thank you. Tim?
No questions.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, a couple of things. I think on the directives, that it would behoove us to just eliminate bullet number 3. I want to go look at it again to check what I'm thinking. Yeah, first of all, I thought we had changed this in recent years to be a little more flexible, but at the same time, it now seems to be in conflict with bullet number 2 and bullet number 5. Our kids are already behind. They're going to be further behind. We don't know yet how far behind they'll be next year, but we're going to have makeup to do. And I think bullet number 3 essentially says net zero. You know, if you add something, you got to take something away. The old Ronald Reagan approach to budgeting. And if the town has funding available, I think we should just leave that open. I'm happy with number 2, where it says what curricular needs and COVID considerations, if I can put it that way, because that gives us the flexibility to be responsive to what our kids' needs are going to be. So again, I'd recommend that we just eliminate bullet number 3 this year anyway, and remind everyone, and particularly our ad hoc work group participants, if that group actually meets this year, that the town still has to vote or have a town meeting article to override, Prop 2.5 override to fund our island home. That deficit has been running millions every year. And if we get a vote favorable at town meeting, we've already had a vote favorable in an election, and that would free up literally millions of dollars in the budget. And we might want to look at some of that. Also on the budget development timeline, I read it now to be saying that we're going to have, excuse me, all of the presentations at one meeting in December, or is that it in 2 meetings? Wait a minute, I got that up as a different document. It says first meeting in December, facilities, technology, and community school. When are we looking at the other schools?
She hasn't even presented that yet, Steve, though.
No, right? I know, but I'm looking at the timeline.
Hold on one second.
Yeah.
Logan, you have a comment?
Just if I may, through the chair, we will have another meeting. We just have to find the time to be able to have that second meeting scheduled. So it will be in there. It's just not something that can go specifically to date on the calendar.
Okay, understood. I knew we couldn't get it all
it's a generic
in one meeting.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's wise to sit through one meeting with all of the budgets, but yeah, thank you for recognizing that, Steve. And thank you, Logan, for clearing that up. Martin, please.
Good evening. We had the meeting yesterday, as Beth mentioned, and I watched the select board presentation that Brian Turbid, the finance director of the town, delivered yesterday. So in fact, what we went through with Beth, with Libby and Brian was that same presentation. To your point, Steve, absolutely, yes. It would be great if the operating override for our island home passes, that frees up about $3.5 million in the town budget. But at the moment, the budget that was presented yesterday with almost level funding of all expenses was negative. So the $3.5 million override would barely make it whole. Now, again, yesterday's projections, as was related to to us, to myself and Dr. Khaled, and presented yesterday to a select board, were very preliminary. The first quarter, fiscal quarter, is not even over. It ends in about a week, so we'll see how it ends. The finance director has committed to review these forecasts and see whether they turn positive. But again, the overriding message from town administration was that the situation right now being looked at was, and I'm directly quoting the town manager, bleak.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you. Okay, moving on, I'd like to invite Chris Morey to give his presentation on the update for COVID-19 activities. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Pauline, and thank you, everybody, for taking the time to let me give you a little update where we are in the world of athletics with all that's been going on. Obviously, I've been trying to keep everybody up to date with regular updates that I've been sending out by email, but there has been a lot that has transpired in the last couple of weeks. Beth and I have met quite a few times, and she felt it would be important that I made a presentation tonight just so that we could get the information out there and answer any questions you might have. Just a little history where everything kind of started with the whole athletic picture for the fall. Everything obviously goes through the MIA. The MIA formed a COVID-19 task force committee that went to work back in April. And they are the group that has been leading the charge from a standpoint of athletics in the state. They've been working in connection with DESE, with EEA, with the MIAA sports management or sports medicine committee. So a lot of really good people in that decision-making process. They presented their guidelines and proposal to the MIA Board of Directors back on August 19th. At that meeting, the Board of Directors voted positively on 11 different articles that were proposed to them. I'm just gonna touch base quick on a couple of those because they're important for everybody to understand what's going on. The biggest thing was that they added a season of play. They call it Fall 2. It's a floating season that's scheduled to take place start February 22nd and run through April 26th. They put that in place in order for the higher risk sports, which was football and competitive cheerleading, to have a place to go. Those two sports were not from day one allowed to participate in fall athletics. So our football program, our cheerleading program are looking forward to that Fall 2 season of play. Once the MIA approved the guidelines that were put out by the task force committee, they released all those to the different district schools. And at that point, we were getting ready to go into an interscholastic athletic program. We had developed, and it was part of the protocols for opening that were presented much earlier. There's a full section in there on athletic protocols from a standpoint of making sure that our athletes are healthy and safe with everything that's going on with the COVID virus. Unfortunately, in the last couple of weeks, things changed with regards to the caseload here. We had a spike, and with that spike, our district went into a red matrix. With that red matrix, from the state standpoint, we were not allowed to participate in interscholastic athletics at the time. I checked in with both our district, the chairman of our district athletic committee, and also with the MIA associate director at the state office to find out just exactly what that meant for us. I was told and confirmed at the time that what that meant was that we weren't currently eligible to participate in athletics, but that once we got out of that red matrix and we got back to either yellow, green, or gray, that we were okay to start up our programs. The next curveball that came our way had to do with league play and the league teams. In early September, we had 2 league schools that already informed us that their administration had told them they did not want them traveling by ferry to either one of the islands. That was Nauset High School and Barnstable High School. So that already kind of threw a monkey into the works from the standpoint of our schedules and playing certain teams. Once we slipped into that red matrix, and after meeting with Beth and after meeting with Roberto Santa Maria, getting a little more information, understanding how the formula worked, I realized that the earliest that we were possibly going to get out of that red matrix was the on that September 30 date posting for the DPH report and guidelines. With that, you're required to have 14 days of practice before you can enter in any kind of gameplay right now. So what that meant for our interscholastic teams was this: the earliest we could possibly start would have been October 1st. The earliest we could possibly play any games would have been October 15th, which basically put us 2 weeks behind everybody else in the league. With us being in the red district, with the concerns from the Cape and Islands League, with the fact that we really couldn't fit into that schedule, Beth and I agreed that the best decision that we could possibly make was to go ahead and take our athletic programs out of interscholastic play and push them into an on-island full intramural setup. That's something that we had already planned for as a plan B. That's something that we had the groundwork laid for and was in the works. So I've given you a copy of the draft that went out to our student athletes and our parents from a standpoint of just what that program looks like. We've been working over the course of the last week to iron out the details with our coaches for each program. And tomorrow we'll be sending out a second email to everybody that'll have a lot more details as far as the program goes and as far as the schedule for both practice and gameplay. The basics of the program is this: we want to run it as a 5-day-a-week program. We're going to try and mirror what we would do with an interscholastic team as much as possible. We've got offerings for every single fall sport that we would normally provide. With that, we're going to be doing gameplay, which is going to be inter-squad. We're trying to break each one of our teams, soccer, field hockey, down into what would be groups for 7 versus 7 play. And with that, we'll be able to break the total number on each team down to 2 different levels so that we can create parity as far as all the kids that are involved. So basically that breakdown goes from grades 6 through 12. If you look at the breakdown by level, you're looking at the lower age bracket in what we call the sub-varsity bracket and the older age bracket in the varsity bracket. So we feel like we have a very, very good plan in place that will get our kids out, get them active, and give them athletic opportunities from a standpoint of, not just the rigors of athletic practices, but the training that they need for the sports that they love, some competition in those sports, and also what they really need is some good social interactions with their peers and with their coaches. I can tell you firsthand from knowing most of these kids and being in touch with a lot of these kids that that's something that we really need. So that's where we are, and we're excited about what we put together, and we think it's going to be real positive for our kids. So with that, I'll leave it open for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Chris. Jen, comments, questions?
Thank you. Chris, I just have to say, you found a way to make lemonade with lemons, and I really appreciate how fast and diligent you were to come up with a plan for our students to still be able to participate at some level. We all know the physical and emotional benefits of being athletic, of, having that physical capability of being with your peers, getting exercise, being outside. together, the camaraderie of teammates, and I think it's really impressive that you were able to do this with safety and with the safety first and foremost in mind for our students and our coaching staff. So thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate it, and I know our students do as well, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Sona.
I just want to reiterate that sports is an outlet during a very stressful time. So it's very important. So thank you, Coach Mari.
Thanks, Zona.
Tim.
I do have my questions about February football. You know, they talked about Green Bay as the frozen tundra. I am not sure that our fields will be any better.
Tim, we're just lucky that we play on Nantucket. We're not out in Western Mass or Northern Mass somewhere. And look on the positive side, it might mean that the Island Cup game could get played on Daffodil Weekend.
I like that.
Steve.
Yeah, Chris, indescribable thanks. Not just for the communication, which you keep us as up to date as anybody on earth, but all the thinking and care that you're putting into coming up with these programs for the kids. I do have to double back on Tim's thoughts, though. Cheerleading, maybe not, but football, wouldn't some of those kids be playing, hopefully, interscholastic basketball at that time, etc., swimming, whatever else it is they're doing? Isn't there going to be some overlap there?
There's not. So the way the state has set things up, the winter sports season starts on November 30th and ends on February 21st. So the seasons are back to back. The tail end of the winter season typically is not booked real heavy, so there is a little bit of wiggle room in there. And they're also allowing wiggle room where, as a school, you can elect to start your program a few days later or a few days earlier if it works with your particular student athletes. The spring program is going to get moved because that Fall 2 season doesn't end till April 25th. So the spring season is now going to start on April 26th and will not end until the 3rd of July. So that's going to get extended through the month of June. And I can tell you, as a spring coach for a number of years, the fact that we're not going to be starting until April 26th is a blessing, because we're not going to have all that cold weather that Tim's talking about.
And it'd be hard to do those things virtually. Listen, I'm going to stop here. The overlapping dates are just a curiosity question with playoffs and stuff like that. And I trust that you will work it out to our best advantage. Thanks again for what you're doing, because it's really above and beyond.
Thanks, Steve.
I would agree with my fellow committee members. We are so fortunate to have you in this position, Chris. So thank you for all of the work that you've been doing and really putting our children first, which is a must, but I really appreciate everything that you're doing. And I take this as the fall to give me plenty of notice for holiday presents of long johns and things that will keep me warm while I'm down at the football field. Still eyeing one of those jackets. I don't know how long I've got to be on committee for. No, that's a whole nother stuff. That's a whole nother.
Get that stuff televised.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you all for the time.
Thank you. Moving on for committee discussions and votes to be taken. Let's see. May I have a motion, please, to accept the executive session minutes of July 24th?
Sona Butler, so moved.
Thank you, Zona. May I have a second?
Second, I pushed the wrong button.
Okay, thanks, Steve. All in favor? Tim Lepre?
Aye.
Zona?
Aye.
And Steve?
Aye.
I am Pauline, aye. Jen has left the meeting in case my fellow committee members realize that I'm not calling on her. Please may I have a motion to accept the workshop executive minutes of September 9th?
Zona Butler, so moved.
Zona Pass, second by Steve. Tim?
Aye.
Thank you. Steve?
Aye.
Zona?
Aye.
And Pauline, aye. May I have a motion to accept the meeting minutes of September 10th?
So moved.
Thank you, Steve.
Second.
Thank you, Tim. Zona?
Aye.
Thank you, Steve.
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And Pauline, aye. May I have the a motion to accept the executive session minutes of September 11th?
Zona Butler, so moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Second, Steve. Thank you. Tim? Thank you. Zona?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Pauline, aye. Thank you. May I have a motion to accept the transfers and invoices, please?
Zona Butler, so moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Tim. Steve?
Aye.
Thank you, Tim.
Aye.
Zona?
Aye.
Thank you, Pauline, aye. Thank you. Moving on to the superintendent's reports. We're going to touch upon first days of school. Beth?
Yes, if I may, I'd like to go chronologically in the with the dates with regard to the pieces of the superintendent's report. So I'm actually going to start with the Department of Education professional development days, if I may. As you all know, Commissioner Riley reduced our compensatory days of the school year from 180 to 170 to allow for 10 professional development days to be used for all districts in preparing for the educational shift of working under a hybrid program or a remote program or any program. There are probably districts that have considered going in person as well. The idea was to front load this PD time with training and professional learning, and that's what we did. That's exactly what Nantucket Public Schools did. We began training our staff and offered professional learning on blended learning, on identifying power standards from the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks that we can focus our learning on our new learning management system, Schoology, which we'll touch on a little bit later. And also, very importantly, building safety protocols and district safety protocols. I want to thank our nurses team that did not only did they work on the district safety protocols tirelessly, along with Ms. Sarah Dellis, who has done a remarkable job this year in working with them and coming up with a document that is so important. But also, I want to share my appreciation to the nurses team for a comprehensive video slideshow that went through district-wide protocols in detail. And they did this for us as we began our professional development days. The second week was to be dedicated to teacher planning, collaboration. A lot of our teachers are now co-teaching and co-planning with this new educational model. So we wanted to make sure to front load with training and professional development, but then offer plenty of time for planning, for collaborating and working together to prepare. Little did we know that after the first 7 days of professional development, we would be shifting again to focus on a remote learning model after the decision to start remotely for the first 2 weeks came with the surge of the COVID-19 cases on the island. Our teachers and administrators really did take this in stride, and we knew that we had a plan, and we knew that we would be able to make that shift with some adjustments. And I appreciate so much that we were able to shift, continue our professional development days by focusing in on technology, making sure that everything was up and running, and that people were set with students' schedules, and that that classes were appropriate for students. I think we did a remarkable job, even with those last three PD days, just shifting them to remote. Overall, these PD days were really helpful, and they gave both teachers and administrators that time to prepare as best they could, even with that additional unexpected shift. So now I'd like to talk about the first few days of school. Obviously, the first day of school was September 16th, and it brought along a lot of excitement. I know that there were a lot of new outfits that students wore, and teachers probably as well, as we all do get excited about that first day of school. There always has to be a little glitch, and our glitch was that our new Chromebooks that we had issued to our 6th and 9th graders didn't seem to be charging properly. And I know that Mrs. Iller, although she's not here, she can attest to that. I will say that our IT director, Jen Erickson, and her team jumped to get immediate distribution of loaner devices to our students so that we were able to get devices in their hands and they were able to connect. She reached out to the company and the distributor. They figured out the problem, and by Friday, they discovered the issue and we were able to remedy the situation. So aside from that little glitch, the first few days seemed to be very successful. I think that the best thing for all of us, teachers, administrators, superintendent, about starting school is seeing the students. As I've walked the hallways of the schools, even though we don't have them in our buildings, it has been so wonderful hearing their voices, hearing their teachers' voices, the laughter, the singing, and teachers have adjusted so quickly to meeting their students virtually and starting to build those relationships, beginning the year this way. I have spent some time over the last few days popping into remote classes at each of the levels, elementary, intermediate, middle, and high school. And it's been wonderful. It's just it's rejuvenated me as an educator. It has reminded me of why I took this job, of why I am here, and the importance of my role as superintendent to continue to put students first. It's just so exciting to have them back, and it's been so wonderful. We can't wait to see some of them in person too. It's all about the students. It's their voices, their faces. It's such a welcome change after many months of not having that. And I look forward to seeing them in person in our classes after October 1st. The next piece I just want to touch on is Schoology. I know you have received some information about Schoology. I want to be clear that that Schoology is a learning management system, a little bit different than Aspen, which is a student information system. So these two systems do not work. They work in tandem in some ways, but not in others. Our student information system, Aspen, collects and maintains all of our state required data, demographic information, specifics on family makeup. It's what we use to report to the state. It's how we build our schedules. It's how we issue grades, and that's very important. Schoology is our learning management system, and that is a system of learning, remote or virtual learning, and it's really a one-stop shop. It's one place where teachers, students, and parents can access learning activities, lessons, resources, and eventually grades. And it was really a push from the commissioner's office at the beginning of the summer that every district in the state adopt a learning management system. So we did as was recommended and began with Schoology. Now, we know that Schoology has, presented us with some difficulty. As I can imagine from most learning management systems that all of a sudden got a complete barrage of districts asking to adopt, they were probably surprised with the amount of business that all of a sudden they had received. So we have had some glitches and some challenges, but we've decided that in order to really make this a successful rollout, that we're going to stretch it out over the year. And it's definitely something that we want to provide as much support as we can to teachers, to students, and also to staff, teachers, students, and parents, because parents will be involved. And this is a learning management system that allows for a lot more parent collaboration. And because of the remote learning days that we have, we know that parent collaboration is going to be really key. So we want to make sure that they have access to the materials and into their students' learning as well. Because you've heard my voice for a good portion of the evening, I would love to invite our curriculum directors, Dr. Jennifer Raybould and Dr. Mandy Bardsley, to give you a few moments of Schoology with regard to how Schoology is, how it's beneficial for students and also how it's beneficial for parents. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
Great. Thank you, Beth. Welcome, Jennifer and Mandy.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how Schoology works for students, and then Mandy's going to talk a little bit about how it works for parents. So I think at some point, if there's a school committee meeting that is not quite as long as this one, we'd love to show you some visuals of what it looks like, because that really does tell the tale with Schoology. It is a great thing for students because it's one landing page where they can access all of their classes. So they're not in a situation where one teacher may use Google Classroom and another one may use a website that they've developed, and all their classes are in one place, and they just click on their classes, and all their teachers' information is in that one place. There's a home page that includes links to folders, to assignments, to discussion boards, to a playlist that has different options and different choices that students can make. And it's a platform for collaboration among students. There's a whole communications site on their individual class where the teacher can communicate with students and students can ask questions. And so it's just really a very organized way for students to be able to access their classes. The links for a Google Meet will be in there. Any apps that their teachers use, any other apps, so Newsela or Zern or whatever other apps that teachers are using for students doing some learning, these can all be housed in Schoology as well. So it's kind of a one-stop shop for students, which is so important when students are students have to do a lot of kind of time management and organization when they're going between home and school the way we're doing. And so this really helps them to stay on task for that. So Mandy, you want to talk a little bit about how it's good for parents?
Sure. So for parents, when they sign into their accounts, they'll come to a landing page where can be some communication, kind of like a Facebook page where there can be updates from different groups that they're involved in within the school. So maybe that's if you have a student at CPS, maybe there's a CPS group, there could be a district group. So whatever groups that we end up developing. In the top right corner, they can select their child from a list of all of their children, not everybody's kids, just their own. So this is an advantage if you have more than one kid in our school system and they're at different schools. So you would go up, let's say you have 3 kids in 3 different schools. In the top right-hand corner, you can select your student and it will take them to a view only of their page. So you would see the playlists that the teachers have uploaded in there. And then you could go up to the top right-hand corner and select the second student, and it would take them to their view only page so that you could see the playlists and the assignments on those playlists that they're expected to do. So it's a great tool for communication, and then a one stop to find all of the materials. And that was one of the big pieces of feedback that we received from last spring, was that we needed one place where all of this was housed or located to make it easier for our parents. I would just like to clarify that with the apps, some of the apps are in Schoology, and then some you can link to through Schoology using the URL. So just one piece of clarification there. Thank you.
So So I would love to finish, first of all, by thanking Jennifer and Mandy with all the work that they've done with Schoology. You still have a little work to do to train your superintendent to make sure she knows what she's doing with Schoology as well. And I appreciate you offering to jump in with us. One thing I do want to mention is because this is a year-long rollout, we are things are moving a little bit slower than we wanted. Of course, like I said, everyone in the world is trying to put learning management systems in place. And so we want to make sure that we give people the support. Our parent rollout plan benchmark is to have all parents involved, or at least have parents be able to become involved by December 1st. We must make sure that all students and staff are uploaded and solidified in their classes first, because Schoology handles data movement in 2 groups. And if you've got 3 groups to work with, you have to have 2 groups set before you can add a 3rd. So that is why it's a little bit slower than what we would have wanted, but we are glad that our students and our teachers can be using Schoology first. So I thank you both for all the work you've done, and also to Jen Erickson, who helped us to get a substantial discount through the Cape and Islands. I think it was the Cape Cod Collaborative. So we are lucky that we have Schoology for this year and for years going forward. So thank you very much. I appreciate any questions. I'm sure we can answer if you have any.
Thank you. Steve.
It's not directly related, but I'm dying to know, do you have a handle yet on how many students have chosen to remain remote throughout the district?
So we did include that data actually in our frequently asked questions, our new frequently asked questions that parents came directly from parents, and it's on our website. I'd say give or take across the district, it's between 15 and 17%. That are remaining remote. We will see if that shifts over the course of time, but that's what we are dealing with right now.
And if kids and or parents start remote, can they come back in physically later, or is it a once and forever choice?
We would love to be able to accommodate as many people as we can. So we will do our absolute best with the spaces that we have available and the staff we have available to be able to bring people in based on that wish to change and come in. The challenges that we're going to see is that until we can provide that space or use the space that we have to the maximum capacity, we under 6 feet, we will be limited in how many students we can have in our rooms. At some point in the future, my hope is that we either have a vaccine option, or we have very, very good treatment options, very low numbers of cases, maybe even none on the island over a long period of time, and we can reconsider along with the union whether or not we could potentially change the distances between desks and consider that as we bring that in. But that is far down the road. Please don't take that and run with it, Mr. Sordovic, because that is something that we will only consider when we have the proper information about that. But we want to be able to accommodate as many students as we can accommodate in the district in person if they so wish to come back under the current MOA with 6 feet distance.
Yeah, I'll bite my tongue for as long as I can.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Tim?
No question.
Thank you, Zona.
No questions. Thank you.
Yep, no questions from me either. Thank you. Thank you, Beth. And thank you, Jen and Mandy, for your presentations. Moving through the agenda, subcommittee work, any comments or reports? Oh, sorry, Beth, did you have another comment?
If I may, my apologies through the chair. I wanted to add one more thing, and it's a thank you to the Harvey Foundation. We just received word that the Harvey Foundation will be providing a pair of blue light glasses for every student and every staff member in the district. And I wanted to thank Adrienne Lombardi and her work with the Harvey Foundation for this wonderful gift. So I know that the order will go in, and as soon as we have them, we will distribute. I appreciate that very, very much.
And you'll tell us now what blue light glasses do.
Blue light glasses assist with screen usage. So if you're looking at a screen for a long period of time, it reduces the glare and allows for less damage. So it's important, and we appreciate it. And I know many people already use blue light glasses, but this is great. And we are really pleased that
Let me know if you have any spares, please.
That's our angel Robin smiling down on us.
That's right. That's right. I have my blue glasses on tonight. They do reduce the strain of your eyes and when you're on the screen so much. So that's wonderful. Thank you for mentioning that. Zona, any comments? Reports subcommittee? No. Tim?
Nothing.
Reports, comments? No. Steve? Reports?
Nope, I'm good, thanks.
Okay. We have our agenda for our upcoming meeting, October 6th. I know Logan is working hard with the town to try to get us back into a routine of our Tuesday meetings, but I know for as long as we stay remote, Channel 18 and other town boards meet on different Tuesdays. So I think we're going to at least be able to secure, hopefully, the first Tuesday, and then for our second meeting, because I do believe we will need a second meeting each month, we may need to be a little bit more flexible, but we're trying to do it not only for everybody here, your schedules, but also for our viewing public. So we are working on that. A reminder to our school committee that we will be adjourning from this meeting and going into executive session. So when we adjourn, I will be asking for a motion to adjourn into that. I did ask Logan to send at 5:30 a link to our executive session Zoom. So you should all have that fresh in your emails. And at this point, is there any other comment before I ask to adjourn? Seeing and hearing none, I would like a motion, please, to adjourn into executive session.
So moved, Zona Butler.
Thank you, Zona. Second?
Second, Tim Leppert.
Thank you, Tim. Steve?
Affirmative.
Thank you, Tim. Aye. Aye. And Zona?
Aye.
And Pauline, aye. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. It was a long one, but I think an important one. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Is a vote we should never take for granted. So this year, make sure your voice is heard. Get your ballot and vote.
I'm Martha Turk, Administrator for Nantucket Census Complete Count Committee. Today I'm talking with Jackie Echevarria, Tiamir Ivanov, and Vanessa Rendero about the 2020 U.S. Census. We know that many members of our community have questions